The university auditorium glowed with celebration. Bright lights sparkled against polished marble floors. Proud parents clapped for their children, and laughter echoed from every corner. It was a day of triumph, a day that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Graduates in black gowns tossed their caps into the air, while families rushed to take photographs, capturing memories that would live forever. Yet, in the middle of all that joy, one man sat quietly by himself. His wheelchair was parked slightly away from the crowd, near the far right corner of the hall. He was not just any graduate, he was a billionaire CEO, known for building one of the fastest-growing companies in the world. But at that moment, his wealth, his power, and his fame meant nothing. He looked at the stage, then at the families hugging each other, and a deep ache filled his chest. His name was Adrian Cole. At 32 years old, he had achieved what many could only dream of. From a small, struggling family background, he had risen to unimaginable heights, becoming a global business leader. Yet, as he watched classmates pose with their parents, siblings, and friends, Adrian felt something money could never buy: the sting of loneliness. Adrian had been paralyzed from the waist down since the age of 19. A tragic car accident had stolen not only his ability to walk, but also much of his carefree youth. What remained was a body confined to wheels, a spirit tested by suffering, and a man who fought against the odds to prove he was not broken. As the crowd cheered another graduate, Adrian's thoughts drifted back to those early years. He remembered the hospital room after the accident, the sharp smell of disinfectant, the sound of monitors beeping, the crushing moment when the doctor told him, "Adrian, you will never walk again." The words had struck harder than the crash itself. In 1 second, his dreams of becoming an athlete, his carefree plans for travel, even the idea of dancing at his own wedding, all of it vanished. Friends visited in the beginning, but slowly, fewer came. Some could not handle the sight of him in a wheelchair. Others simply moved on with their lives. His family tried to encourage him, but poverty made things difficult. His father worked double shifts to cover medical bills, while his mother quietly wept when she thought no one noticed. Adrian hated seeing the pain in their eyes. More than once, he considered giving up. But something inside him refused to surrender. He turned to books, online lectures, and late-night study sessions. If his body had betrayed him, then his mind would become his weapon. He studied finance, technology, and leadership with the hunger of a man who had nothing to lose. His wheelchair became not a prison, but a throne of determination. The road to power. By his mid-20s, Adrian had already launched his first startup, a small software company built with sheer willpower and sleepless nights. Investors at first dismissed him, assuming his disability made him weak. But Adrian shocked everyone with his sharp intelligence, relentless discipline, and fearless decision-making. One company turned into another, then another. Within a decade, Adrian had built an empire. He was on the cover of business magazines, invited to global conferences, and respected by leaders twice his age. His net worth grew into billions, but with every success came an emptiness he couldn't escape. Wealth had brought him admirers, but not friends. Business partners respected him, but few truly knew him. At night, when the applause faded, Adrian still sat alone. He longed for simple things: a warm conversation, someone to share his victories with, someone who saw him, and not just the billionaire CEO in a wheelchair. Back to graduation day. The announcer called another name, and cheers erupted again. Adrian clapped politely, though his hands trembled slightly on his lap. This was supposed to be his big day too. Years earlier, he had promised himself that he would finish his degree, no matter how successful he became. He wanted to prove that education mattered as much as wealth. And today, that dream had finally come true. Yet no one was beside him. His parents had passed away years ago. His siblings lived abroad, tied up with their own families. Employees and business partners had sent congratulatory emails but were too busy to attend. The billionaire CEO, admired by millions, had no one to celebrate with at his own graduation. The irony cut deep. All around him, graduates posed for photographs, mothers adjusting their children's gowns, fathers patting proud shoulders, siblings fighting playfully for a spot in the pictures. Adrian lowered his gaze, pretending to check his phone, but inside, his heart ached. For years, he had convinced himself that loneliness didn't matter, that success could fill the void. But sitting there in that noisy hall, surrounded by joy he couldn't share, Adrian realized how fragile he truly was. The silence within the noise time moved slowly. He tried to distract himself by looking at the stage, but his mind kept drifting. He thought of the accident again, of the many nights he stared at the ceiling, wondering why fate had chosen him. He thought of the countless meetings where people smiled at his money but ignored his soul. He thought of the way women looked at him, sometimes with pity, sometimes with discomfort, rarely with genuine interest. And for the first time in a long while, Adrian asked himself a dangerous question. What if all this success means nothing? He clenched his hands, forcing the thought away. Yet it stayed, haunting him like a shadow. The applause in the hall grew louder as the ceremony neared its end. Graduates were now hugging their families, taking group pictures, laughing together. Adrian watched quietly, an outsider in the middle of the celebration. He adjusted his tie, straightened his gown, and tried to smile. But inside, his chest felt hollow. That was when he noticed her. The stranger at the edge of the crowd, a woman, stood holding the hand of a small boy. She wasn't dressed in luxury like many others, but there was something warm about her presence. Her gown was simple, her hair tied neatly, and her smile, though faint, carried a gentleness that stood out amid the noise. She watched the graduates with quiet pride, and the little boy beside her clapped excitedly every time the audience cheered. Unlike others who moved in groups, she seemed to stand slightly apart, as though she didn't quite belong to the grandeur of the hall. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. Adrian quickly looked away, unsure why he suddenly felt exposed. But fate, it seemed, had already chosen that their paths would cross.